Welcome, as I walk around, to the Immersion Lab. So we're trying to fully immerse you today. I've been walking around just showing you the folks that are here, a little bit of the hardware. Hopefully you're able to hear the sound. It's going to be a lot of sound today. It's a great pleasure to have with us today, sort of both people online, so thank you, and in person. Brian Anthony here, the Associate Director of MIT.nano, broadcasting with a whole crew of folks here from the Immersion Lab in our next Immersed In series, Immersion Spatial Sound. So we're joined today by Professor IanCondry and Dr. Philip Tan. Okay, sorry, okay. Well, I just elevated you. From the Comparative Media Studies Writing Program, immersing ourselves in audio and the future of listening. Today it's a hybrid event. So I think the experience online will welcome your feedback in terms of how it's going. We won't have anything other than sound today. So after I'm done here, the slide will go down. We'll be broadcasting from that camera, if that's up there. It'll be pinned here in a second. But I think, okay, enough of me talking. Ian, Philip, thank you for joining us today. Folks, please chat your questions as we go. We'll hold Q&A at the end. We'll marshal questions between the people that are here in person. Yeah, people coming in, we'll have some seats. We'll be sort of immersed here. And for folks online. So I think with that, as we experiment with our sort of this production, we can stop sharing. I'll be quiet, and Ian and Philip, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brian. Really appreciate this. So I'm IanCondry. I'm a professor of cultural anthropology, and I teach in the Department of Comparative Media Studies and Writing, where Philip and I are both located. I encourage everybody to come into the middle. Can you bring chairs onto here or no? So if you want a chair, come into the middle. What we're demonstrating today is a brand new sound system. It was just set up here in this room a matter of weeks ago. And if you look around, what you can see is we have 7 speakers in a circle around and 1 subwoofer sitting underneath the table over here. So that makes a 7.1 system. So if you see this 7.1, 5.1, 9.2.4, what that refers to is first the number of speakers around in a circle, then the number of subwoofers you have, and if there's a third number, that's the number of speakers you have up higher. We're aiming to get another 4 up higher, and that'll be a further development of the lab. But the 7.1 allows us to do all kinds of surround sound tricks. So we're here to introduce that this is a room. The Spatial Sound Lab was a project that I started in November 2019, and it's a community studio. It's mostly a community. It's more than technology. And in part because I'm an anthropologist, so I'm interested in society and culture. And I think one of the things that's so interesting about spatial sound, which just refers to sound that comes from around you instead of just from 2 speakers. In fact, there is even some spatial sound that you can do on headphones. But the main thing we're interested in is trying to make immersive sound audio experiences in space where we can see each other, interact directly. That's sort of the goal of the Spatial Sound Lab. And we have a studio over in W20. That's actually a 16.4 system that uses a slightly different technology. But it's the same idea of having sound come from all directions. And so I encourage you to, if you're at all interested in sound, or if you have friends or colleagues who are interested in sound, let them know we exist. We're a new project. And we're working on all kinds of, put it closer.
Move the mic up.
Move the mic up, okay. Here we go. Yeah, testing. Yeah, it's spinning back. Thanks, Puneet. So that's the basic idea of the Spatial Sound Lab. It's a community studio for making immersive sound productions. We've been in operation since 2019, but it's been fits and starts, obviously, with the pandemic. Now there's been a flood in W20. W20's closed. So thank goodness for this room, you know. So now we have a new room up and running, and we're very excited to develop research and different kinds of experiments and experiences using spatial audio. So we have a couple things to demonstrate today. I've been closely working with Philip Tan here, who's a research scientist with me in CMSW. And he was instrumental in getting this work together. Shout out to Talis as well, who did a lot of work to make this audio space happen. And it's thanks to support from the NCSoft seed grant as well. So shout out to NCSoft.
And Brian and Praneeth.
And Brian and Praneeth for all the help as well. It's really a great team to work with. I'm very excited to have some time and an opportunity to work with the Immersion Lab and MIT.nano. So we have two projects for today. One is Philip's going to talk about the project he's been working on with some Europe students as well, thinking about video games in particular. And then I'll give a little demo talking about some of the history of spatial audio and why I think it's particularly interesting right now. And then we'll have some time at the end for questions as well. Are there any questions just to get started too? Anything I should have left out? And we'll have more time at the end as well.
Question online? Let's see. Does any of the signal processing for 7.1 have pertinence for two-channel earbuds?
Absolutely, yes. And so I'll talk about that a little bit more afterwards. But the main thing to know is that this new era of surround sound is designed for exactly that. That you're creating files now of various kinds that say, okay, I want this bird over there and that bird over there. Right now, you might hear we're listening to a rainforest composition by Steve Feld of the highlands of Papua New Guinea. This is a 7.1 mix that was made, but with the software, it will also mix down to headphones, and it's called binaural. Is a sort of different way of thinking about stereo that tries to give you more spatial information. So absolutely, good question. Was it ambisonic is one of the, yes, exactly. Ambisonic is one of the ways of rendering sound in 3D. That's exactly right. And there's others, Dolby Atmos we use here. There's the D&B Soundscape. There are other versions as well. But yes, ambisonics is a very interesting mathematical formula for rendering 3D sound.
Actually, I should sort of build on that. The fact is that we've had competing surround sound systems. Sony has its own. You might have heard of DTS, stuff that you've seen in the movie theaters, right? Atmos, this room spec'd out to meet Atmos standards, which is by the Dolby Corporation. And so even the things like where the speakers are particularly positioned are kind of based on that. Dolby Atmos was originally designed for theater applications. Ambisonic, I think it doesn't privilege a particular direction. It's 360 degrees even coverage of all speakers. And it's kind of more of a spherical kind of model. So this is kind of a compromise between what you would find between a studio, like a production studio setup, and a movie theater. But both of us are kind of strong believers that the kinds of experiences we're interested in are about moving around in the space, not about being stuck in a chair. In fact, you can get some amazing immersive experiences with just 2 speakers if you're willing to be in a very specific spot. You can create almost 360 sensations. I think people like to describe it as holographic, where you can sort of almost, if you close your eyes, you can imagine where all the individual instruments are. And that works really well if you're willing to be in a very specific location. But once we free people to move around in a space, that's where the need for multiple speakers really, really comes into play. And the ability for you to turn your head around. And it becomes a little bit easier for your brain to figure out where sounds are supposed to be coming from. But we're all still trying to create an illusion that there's sound coming from directions where there aren't any speakers at all. The illusion works better when we have a lot of coverage of speakers. And it doesn't work so well when there's not so much speakers like we have in the back of this hall right now. So Atmos privileges a specific direction, whereas ambisonics kind of tries to sort of spread the error evenly across the space.
Go ahead. Why don't you talk about your
Oh,
Roar
yeah.
of the Crowd project, Philip?
Sure. So one of the things that we were brainstorming over back in the proposal process was what will we use this sort of sound system for? Whether it's an Atmos system or the 16-channel system over in the Spatial Sound Lab, and brainstorming in the middle of a pandemic. I don't know how many of you remember the Beijing Olympics. Where there were many officials and many competitors down on the fields and nobody in the stands. And they had to artificially generate crowd noise to be able to just sort of make the broadcast look right, but also to motivate the competitors, right? There's no doubt that having a sense of a crowd there will motivate certain people to perform better. We both come from a music making background. I'm a DJ, you're a DJ, but you're also a music producer. And I think Ian's already talked about the importance of that live environment where we can interact with people. In the Beijing Olympics and in many sports events and live performance events with artificial crowd noise, it sounds like it's real, but intellectually you know it's not. You know that was generated from a recording, a sample pack somewhere. Whoever recorded that recorded it years or months ago. They're not watching this performance. So the project that I'm currently working with 2 Europs is to artificially create crowd noise with real people. So real people watching at home over live streaming will run a little web browser window. They give it permission to let you basically talk back to the performers. Of course, there's the problem that can be easily abused. People can start heckling, for instance, or it could record sounds in your home that you don't want heard, right? So part of this entire process is to scramble it in a way that still sounds like a real crowd. I've got a few samples that I want to play for you. We haven't gotten that far. Hold on. Touch ID, here we go. So we're still playing around with some of the parameters, but I'll give you an idea. This kind of crowd noise that's coming out of my computer now is generated from YouTube reaction videos, which is actually very indicative of the kind of sounds that we expect to be getting from live spectators of a live stream event. So that's what it'll be picking up. But we've run it through, some of you are familiar with Max, which is basically a software synthesizer and package where you can sort of process audio so that all of that audio gets scrambled and you can't actually make out what anybody's saying. The hope that we have is that since all this information is being captured in real time with some delay being transmitted over the internet, but then we can synthesize it to at least get a sense of sentiment. So we can tell when a crowd is applauding or cheering or booing. If we're particularly lucky, maybe we can even get some chants to be able to work out without stepping on anybody's privacy, right? It's like if you're having a conversation with your kids at home or something and you're enjoying the show, you don't want that conversation to be intelligible on the other end. But if you're cheering, you do want that to be intelligible. And so what we're hoping is to use this for musical performances. So I know the Nano Lab does a lot of work with, the Immersion Lab does a lot of work with music, with musicians. So imagine them here doing a live concert online, and the crowd is around them. They'll be able to hear the voices of real people responding to the kind of music that they're playing. We've also thought about esports, which is, I think, more up the NC Soft's alley, where we have electronic competitions of games, basically, team-based or one versus one, where people will it's basically a sports broadcast on computers. And during the pandemic, they couldn't have crowds either, because usually those are filmed in television studios. Well, what if we at least allow the competitors to hear their fans cheering for them, since most of their fans are going to be online. More of their fans are going to be online than could ever fit in that in the studio. Both Ian and I have talked about, like, the acid test will be improv comedy, because because of the time delay, we don't know if they'll possibly work. But those are kind of like the use cases that we imagine. Again, bringing real people into a real space, even if they're remote, just like our friends on Zoom today, right?
Exactly, and I'm sure you've heard, if you were watching sports during the pandemic, watching a basketball game or a hockey game or football, that they piped in, the sound, but it was just recordings.
Right.
It's basically somebody playing a keyboard saying, "Oh," or "Yeah," or "Boo," the ref sucks, and they had a number.
I don't think they had that sample.
Yeah, maybe not. Well, yeah, hockey seemed to go the farthest, actually, I thought, in the sound. But this is different, and this is about using live voices, real people, trying to do things live, which has certainly been a kind of emphasis of our lab, because it's interested in sort of the social possibilities of sound.
The connections between human beings. Yeah.
Exactly, a connection between human beings.
Even in those stadiums, those like the hockey arenas, you notice that in order to pipe in that sound, they basically set up an ad hoc surround sound system. Right. There were speakers placed all around. It wasn't just coming from one direction, because that wouldn't sound like a crowd. They knew that already. So they've kind of proven that they need this. If we ever have another pandemic, I'd love to have this technology actually work, right? Because as a music performer, I really missed being in front of people.
Any questions, comments on Philip's project, or our project, but that Philip's leading?
Well, I have another use case for you. So we held an all hands.
Oh yes.
Oh, sure.
Let me tell that to you. Yeah.
So we had an all hands meeting today, about 50, 60 people. The people, and we were all presenting. At the end of every presentation, people would clap.
Right.
People on the outside couldn't hear the clapping. And people on the outside couldn't respond to what was going on. So smaller scale than a football game, but definitely emotional connection is needed there.
Yeah, as a DJ, 60 people would be a good party. That's like very similar sort of situation where you're just applauding people. If you had a company retreat or something, that would be a real thing. Oh, sorry, back up here again. Other questions? Technical questions are also good.
Is it granular synthesis? Is that what you've settled on?
That is granular synthesis. We're basically sampling using a web app. It's being sent over, I think we're just doing Node.js, and we're just putting files onto a server. That server saves it to a hard drive, and we just have our synthesizer program reading those files off the hard drive. We'll see if that's fast enough. If that's not fast enough, maybe we'll just do something in a database instead, because that will be a little bit faster. I suspect it'll be fast enough if we were using solid-state drives. So, yeah.
Just a quick question about latency, actually.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just asking about latency in particular. We've all sat on Zoom, and once you get beyond maybe a couple hundred milliseconds, it gets real awkward. So thinking about, I understand the idea of like averaging it over time of like, we're cheering, and so that makes sense, but sort of more interaction where that latency is going to come into a challenge, or how you're thinking about latency.
So definitely, I think there will always be latency. So the question is, how much does that affect the experience? We settled on we'll try to minimize it when that actually becomes a problem. But there are certain use cases like improv comedy where the latency is just going to be too much, because you're basically in conversation with an audience. But in the use case I'm most familiar with, which is DJing, it's okay for the audience to respond a couple of seconds, after you've done something cool, for instance. And we actually saw this play out during the pandemic, where DJs shifted to live streaming instead of playing in clubs. And everything they did, they would get a response in text chat about 5-10 seconds later, because people needed to type out their response. They need to select the emoji that they wanted to put on, the little flame emotes for something that was fire, for instance. And that would delay everything. Yet it was the kind of positive reinforcement that DJs need to be able to do their job. So I think that could also work for, say, a band. Say you've got an indie band or something doing a live stream. a tiny desk performance or something, that could probably work. There'll just be a longer gap between finishing the song and hearing the response. Yeah, which I think people can, in personal experience, it's easy to get used to that.
There was a question online. The question was related to how does this relate to those with hearing or hearing impairments? So visualizing sound, for example.
Visualizing sound. My project doesn't actually address that. It's entirely audio-based. It certainly doesn't actually do all that much for the people at home unless the broadcaster decides that they're going to find some way to pipe that generate audio back to an audience, which is entirely doable. That will be a broadcaster's choice. If the broadcaster wants the people at home to hear the sound of their own cheers, they can totally do that. That's just an audio mixing setup. However, one thing that could be really, really cool is we could choose to modulate the synthesizer not based just on the sounds that people are producing, we're definitely capturing that sound, but also the intensity of the text chat, the live stream real-time response. That's an idea that we've considered, which will allow people who are primarily not interacting with an event via audio to still have an influence on the event. Right, so say an esports competition where you can pretty much see everything that's going on without hearing anything. You can still influence how the performers or the competitors or the broadcasters enjoy the experience by showing your support in text. And nice thing about text is that we can analyze that text. It's like if you type in a particular team's name, for instance, then we can maybe have that side of the chant be a little bit louder. If you type in the opposing team's name, you play the other chant or something like that. That's a little bit closer to what has already been done with live sports events, where they're basically playing samples. But again, we are using real audio that's being captured from real people, even if it's not the person who's typing in chat. So I, as a person in chat who's not listening to the audio at all, could affect how the people in the actual space hear the audio of real people watching the show.
Yeah, if anything, the kind of the visual for the hearing impaired, it's better now. I mean, because it's mostly text and it's text scrolling by. So this is trying to add in sound. Well, great, thank you. We have more questions, I think. One more question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So technically, how do you remove the private text from people's conversation? Does that happen in real time, or is it pre-processed afterwards?
Oh, yeah, it's scrambled basically. So we don't remove it, we make it unintelligible. So we know there's a private conversation going on, but we don't know what that is.
How do you detect that it's private?
Just scramble everything.
We scramble everything, whether it's private or it's public. It's like everything is sort of messed up. Now, there is a privacy concern. We are collecting 1 second samples. So we're getting 1 second clips of conversations, and that, I don't know about whether that could be incriminating for some people or embarrassing for some people. But before anyone gets to hear it, it has to go through our software synthesizer first. So if you're really worried about security, technically those 1 second samples are saved and then deleted from a hard drive somewhere, and those could be recovered. But we're not collecting continuous 1 second samples. It's like 1 second, and then there's a break, and then there's a 1 second, and there's a break, and it's pretty random. Although we're still adjusting the random windows, we don't know how random to make it. So my guess is that it's going to be really hard to stitch together an intelligible sentence out of anything. Still, we don't want to make it possible for you to actually get a full sentence out of anybody.
And maybe we should say that's what granular synthesis is. It takes a stream of sound and takes a very thin slice of it, so you just get a little bit of feeling of the sound, but not say a whole word.
So we're taking about a 1 second, and then we're splitting it into like 100 millisecond grains of sound, and then we're crossfading between each one of these grains over time. So you're not even hearing that full 1 second playback in full. It's again scrambled, not just scrambled within that sound, but also scrambled with other people's sounds. That was what I was playing earlier. The other thing that we're talking about private conversations. If somebody's having a private conversation in a real space, like, you know, they're actually in an audience in a real music venue, other people can hear that too, right? It's like, and that's kind of what we want to keep. It's like, you can murmur among yourselves, you know, talk with your friends at home. And yeah, that it will be an audio, that will be audio that people will actually hear in the venue that the live event is being broadcast. But that's real. That's what actually happens in a real space. It gives you the sense that these people exist and they're actually there. So that's what we're trying to keep. It's an opt-in system though. You have to give your browser permission to actually record, and you actually have to hit a button to start the recording. Once you hit the button, then it's automatic until you turn it off.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Philip. Excellent. Thank you. That's the roar of the crowd. Phil Tan, if you're interested in that. Maybe if people want to sit down, we could move some chairs in here. There's some more chairs I see sitting around over here. There's even a step stool.
Should we put the music back on?
Yeah, let's put the music back on.
Okay.
And come in the middle. The middle is better. Or sit on the floor even is fine.
Actually, do you want to tell us what we're listening to?
Yes, exactly. All right. Good. All right. Brief history of spatial sound. Okay. So this is kind of a new project for me. I'm an anthropologist. I study how cultural movements go global from below. So I looked at how hip hop took root in Japan in the 90s. I looked at how Japanese animation became a global phenomenon. And now I'm kind of interested in whether this spatial audio thing can become something. And if so, what's the process? What's the relationship between the technology and the social situations where people find it useful? In fact, there's a long history of thinking about this in technology and society. For example, when the phone, the phonograph, the radio were invented in the 1880s, it really took like 50 years before it settled into what these technologies would actually be used for. And we're exactly in the same mode right now when we think about surround sound. There's all sorts of different ideas about what it might be useful for, but it hasn't locked in to a thing that it is going to be. And that's what I find super exciting. It's like this fluid moment of technology and society in thinking about new kinds of experiences. So the first thing to realize about spatial sound is that it's not new. That humans have been dealing with sounds coming around us for as long as we've been listening. Animals of all kinds do this trick. And in fact, even these cave paintings that we know about, these early prehistoric caves, were likely sound spaces more than they were painting spaces. And we know this because you see a painting of a horse in a cave, and when you clap your hands in that spot, it makes a reverberation that sounds like a galloping horse. So we know that these prehistorical humans were interested in sound, and especially spatial sound. Okay, you go through the history of churches. Churches too, interesting sonic environments. When the liturgy was in Latin, didn't matter if you knew what people were saying, it was the reverberant voice of God bouncing around that they were aiming for. When the liturgy turns into the vernacular, they change the sonics of churches so the speaker is more intelligible. And this is all kinds of ways that sound and space, orchestras, chamber music was designed for very reverberant chamber rooms to have the sounds bouncing around. So spatial sound has been around a long time. Gamelan orchestras, right, play with the mismatch of tones that cause this vibrato in different spaces of the room. There's all sorts of things, ways that we use spatial sound. So when I'm talking about spatial sound, what I'm more talking about is thinking about the technologies of recording, playback, and performance. And that's sort of our sweet spot. And if you think about that history, you know, this idea of spatial sound, it really points to how our senses have atrophied in this era of the Walkman and television, where everything comes from a single point or it just comes from our ears, and we're not as tuned into hearing sounds coming around us. In fact, the rainforest sample I was playing earlier by Stephen Feld, he tells stories of being in the forest, kids following around because they have nothing else to do, him pointing the speaker up at a bird, and the child going, no, professor, it's over here. And that they can do this trick that he couldn't do, and he's a professional jazz musician, quite accomplished as a sound person. So in any case, there's this interesting way in which what we learn from sound it can be expanded quite dramatically as we move into an immersive sound environment. Now, what's interesting is in the history of recorded sound, there was a real boom in quadraphonic recordings in the 1970s. And so from about 1969 to 1975, all sorts of music was made in quadraphonic. So here's an example of Morton Subotnick in 1969 using a Buchla synthesizer, which was designed to work. So that's a song called Touch by Morton Subotnick, 1969. If you can believe it, this was actually a hit album. Sold 40,000 copies. It's very hard to even sell 40,000 copies of an album today, but back in the day, this was like a hit album. And the way they distributed it was as a stereo vinyl record, but then it's put through a processor that splits 2 channels into 4. In fact, we have one of these modern versions of that as well. In fact, I just ordered the original album so we can see if the new modern version, but it's a splitter that would be put inside your amplifier to take a stereo track and split it into 4. This is one of the ways of transmitting quadraphonic sound. So that's 1969. But the interesting thing, oops, that's not it. Hold on, that's not right. What's the problem here? Let's try this. Is that almost all pop albums in the early 1970s were made for quadraphonic sound. They thought that was going to be the future. Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, Doobie Brothers, all these albums were made in quadraphonic, including this little sample here from Herbie Hancock, album called Headhunters. Wait, it's only happening in the front. What the hell? Joke they put into it. It just starts in the front, and then they'll bring it back. So the recording industry thought that quadraphonic would be the future. But it sort of ends around 1975. And this is one of the sort of interesting questions of technology and society. sort of why do things fail? And it was often regarded as a failure. Right now, to me, it doesn't look like a failure. It looks like it just took 50 years till we could distribute it on Apple Music, and now it's back, actually. And all this work that people have written off as being a failure is actually remarkable historical documents right now, and they're becoming available, and you can stream this and other works of this era in Apple Music in 5.1. We also have that option here as well. And I don't know the full answer of why it failed, but I think my guess is I would blame television. I think it wasn't about sound. I think television took over. The way you set up your room was you on one wall, the television on the other wall. The stereo adapts to sit next to the television, or it's a piece of furniture in the room. But it's not something where you sit in the middle around the campfire, the coffee table. Our rooms, our households got set up differently. So it sort of fades out. Jump ahead. Recording industry goes on. Vinyl, cassette tapes, CDs. CDs are making so much money for the recording industry. It's unbelievable. Because prices stay high even as the cost of making them goes down to zero. They're making bank, especially in the 90s. But by the end of the 90s, people have already replaced all their libraries. And the record companies say, we need a new format. We need a new CD. So we're going to invent the super audio CD, DVD audio. It's going to be 5.1 or 7.1 sound, competing formats. Philips was going at it. Sony was going at it. And now in the 2000s, you've got these these technology companies paying artists to make multi-channel versions of their music. So for example, one of the groups that's always been quite interested in spatial sound is the Flaming Lips. The Flaming Lips is called Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots.
She's a black belt in karate, working for the city. She has to discipline her body, 'cause she knows that it's demanding to defeat those evil machines. I know she can beat them. Oh, yes, she may. They don't believe me, but you won't let those robots eat me. Yes, she may. They don't believe me, but you won't let those robots feed me.
So Flaming Lips, they've done all sorts of interesting stuff. And here's a Japanese artist named Cornelius. Same era, it's about 2003. Ooh, that's a nice subwoofer in here. Don't get a lot of that at home, so that's nice. So that's another idea. So here's just another artist. Other artists were working in this space, making things in 2000. A lot of reissues were coming out, this sort of 2000, 2005 era. But again, it doesn't catch on. And why does it fail this time? Well, probably MP3s, I would say, is the answer. Sort of, you know, in the ways what was revolutionizing sound and music in the early 2000s was the MP3. And the idea that you can pay $30 for a 5.1 album on your DVD audio, or I'm just going to get it for free. I don't know. Tough call. And also the libraries, endless for free, and it's very limited for this. And you need a box. You need that special box. They were trying to make money on all this stuff. So again, it sort of fades out. Again, I wouldn't say fail. I mean, there was this era of really robust surround sound music being created, but it doesn't catch on to the mainstream. And so this becomes sort of another interesting aspect of thinking about this history of spatial sound, is that the people who are into making spatial sound, it didn't fail. It didn't end. It's been going on the whole time, and people have been doing it. And this is sort of me as an anthropologist too. I've sort of learned this as I've started to dive into the scene over the last 5 years. That from the outside, people always say to Ian, that's so niche. That's so marginal. Why are you studying hip hop in Japan? Is there even hip hop in Japan? Does it even exist? And then you go there, you say, no, there's thousands and thousands of people who believe in this as the future, and that's really interesting. And so then it's rather a question of, well, how do things move into the mainstream? What is that process? Does it matter, frankly, that it gets into the mainstream? How far into the mainstream does it have to get before you say, it's arrived? And I was having this debate with a friend of mine, Ben Bloomberg. He was at MIT in the Media Lab, and he's quite a leader in the spatial sound area, works with Jacob Collier. And I said, Ben, is it gonna happen? You know, is spatial sound gonna be a thing? He's like, Ian, it's already a thing. He's like, what are you talking about? It's over. It's happening, and it's going to be huge. It's already huge. I don't know what you're talking about. So it's kind of interesting that way, and I kind of believe that too. And so now we jump ahead to our current era. So the last few years, you've got a number of companies diving into this space. Dolby Atmos. Dolby has a new system called Atmos. Sort of atmosphere is the idea. And the new era is an object-based mixing style. Okay, so if what we're listening to here has been designed for five streams of sound plus your subwoofer track, which you may or may not have. And then you send it out as a collection of 5. But the new format, the new idea is called object-based mixing, where you make a single audio file. You say, okay, I want the bass over here, the drum over there. I want one hi-hat here, one hi-hat over here. And then I want the hi-hats to actually sort of move a little bit like this as the song goes along. And you set that into a composition where the audio objects are placed in space. This is why it's interesting compared to ambisonics. Object-based mixing says you've got audio objects and I want them in different areas of the room. It can be above and below and all that too. Ambisonics, they also call this, it's a long word, but volumetric scene-based audio. Okay, it's a big word, but all it means is that you're trying to capture a single 3D environment. You can still do objects within that 3D environment, but the logic is somewhat different. It's more like, okay, I've recorded a playground, like I've seen one of these ambisonic mixes where it's a playground and kids are running around. It's very evocative. But the idea is it captures kind of a real scene. That boundaries are a little loose, but it's kind of two trends in spatial audio right now. But what it opens up, it says, well, I'm listening on headphones, or I've got a 7.1, or I've got 16.4, or I've got a whole dome of speakers. And it says, no problem. We'll mix it down to whatever your playback system is. Okay, so that's one thing about this new era. It's much more flexible. And it allows you to create things that can now be distributed too. I mean, this is the other thing that had been a little missing when nobody owned quadraphonic amplifier. Can't buy them anymore. Well, it turns out we can hook you up if you need it, or if you want it. The little decoder box is actually available for $150 now. We have a few of them. Try it out. So this is the new era, and so it enables things. Some artists who've been performing in quadraphonic their entire careers. So Suzanne Ciani is a synthesizer musician. She lives in Malibu. She's gotten quite wealthy. Is my thing not working?
Yeah, it went off. Okay,
It went off. It'll switch over. And she uses a Buchla synthesizer, which is the same synthesizer that we heard at the beginning with Morton Subotnick, that was designed for quadraphonic. It's always designed to have 4 channels coming out, to be a surround. It's got nice little rotator knobs so you can get things spinning around. But she'd never recorded in quadraphonic until 2018, when somebody said, this is terrible, you know, we should do this. And we have this little decoder box where you record it in quad, you send it down to 2 channels, put it up on Spotify, and then put it back through another decoder box, an encoder box and a decoder box that splits it out into 4, and that's what this recording is from. Let's get this going. Oops, that's not it. Here we go. Okay, and I'm running out of time, so I'll go quickly here. But you can hear how it has this kind of spinning thing. I want to make a little time for discussion too, so let me skip ahead a little bit. So that's one example. This is 2018 live quadraphonic, and then you just got pop musicians making dance music too. It's a little band out of Switzerland called Yellow. These guys are funny. Yellow is the name of the band. No W. All right. All right, it's a little self-indulgent, but I'm going to play some of my music too. Okay, here we go. Here we go. I don't have a lot of people requesting it, so I've got to do it here. Now, sort of as an example of how this technology is sort of mixed and merged and still taking shape, what I use is an ambisonic mixer. Envelope for Live, it's called. It's free tools. But it uses ambisonics for mixing music. And you can put your objects and move them around. And it has kind of nice feeling to it. And that's it. And that's what I had to share. Here's another little example. Because when I heard this technology, I said, well, it's obvious. The way this becomes a global phenomenon is better dance parties. That's what you need. You know, that once this is in the clubs, then you're like, oh yeah. People are going to be like, oh yeah, I need quadraphonic. I was in the club. It was great. So what happens if you're like, we're club guys. And so, you know, you go to the clubs and you're hanging out in the clubs, and once you're used to that subwoofer just pounding through you, you miss it after a week or so. You're like, I need the hot tub. I need that sonic hot tub just going through my inner organs with that low frequency bass. So anyway, that was my dream always. I was like, well, parties. But what we've learned from kind of having this lab is that everybody comes with different ideas. We've got other things going on, like a black hole sonification is another thing we've done in the in the lab as well. All right, so that's it. So that's the idea. That's spatial sound. That's some of the things that are interesting about it. There's other things about it. Please, questions?
Wait, just want to make sure we get the audio here, so please.
Here we go.
Especially for your pieces, I felt there was an illusionary sound source. Previous pieces, it was clear where the sound was coming from, but your pieces was like more illusionary location. But my question is about the facility in general. It's an exciting facility to know that it exists here. And I was curious about how accessible it would be for researchers. My research is in architectural acoustics, so very much overlaps with what you are doing.
Right.
So I was curious if it would be accessible and how.
Yeah, exactly. Well, get in touch with me, and we're trying to sort it out. I mean, we're still, we're just getting going. But yeah, that's the idea: is a community studio that everybody can use. And so we had more accessibility when W20 was open. We're still waiting to hear. I'm guessing W20 is not going to be open until the fall. Is how I'm reading the tea leaves right now. It was supposed to close in April anyway. April to August it was supposed to be closed, and now it's just 2 months till the mid-April. So, and I heard there was a lot of damage.
And let me add, so right now you're in the Immersion Lab in MIT.nano. So we are a central facility. We're open to the MIT community. So if you want to get in here, let us know. Reach out to Immersion at mit.edu.
Yeah.
You have Talas and Praneeth and Annie and myself. And so our job is to help the community, the researchers that are sort of leading the way and creating the infrastructure that allows you to explore the things you want to do. So by all means, reach out.
Yeah, exactly. So please, let's exchange. Please.
So like a lot of modern day electronic musicians are creating their own instruments in programs like Ableton, where the instruments that you design can respond and modulate based off of like the expressiveness of the performer, like their velocity or like how like their speed and different parameters. Is that possible with like the object-based stereo imaging, or surround sound? Yeah, where you could have like a performer actually like their expressiveness controlling like where the sound is coming from, and sort of have like a randomness that creates like a real inclusiveness or like a that's possible.
People are building it. It's still sort of the early days, I would say. But yeah, people are working on, track the dancer. The sound follows the dancer, for example. People have made gloves where you throw sounds around. People have VR goggles where you're putting sounds around in space. Of course, there's endless possibilities. And I use a lot of the stuff in live, and these Max patches are appearing all the time, doing different things for spatial audio. So, and I do recommend Envelop, because they've got some nice tools in there that then can be adjusted and automated and whatever you want. So there's all sorts of possibilities. Yeah.
I would like to, I'm just recognizing we are in person and online, so I want to take the opportunity to pause for a moment. I'm going to take the mic for a second and say thank you to Ian and Philip. So applause and thank you to our audience here. So we're going to be signing off. If you want to get in here, let us know. The next Immerse series will be coming up. We'll get that advertised. But folks that are here, please stick around and ask questions if Ian and Philip are available. So thank you, everybody, and come back to the next Immersed. And that's a break, right? A wrap. Yeah, break. Yeah, here we go. Bye, all.